Frustration doesn't shout, it whispers. It slowly convinces you that your dreams are too heavy to carry and too far to reach. And before you realize it, you stop moving, not because you failed, but because you grew tired of trying. Frustration does not begin with failure. It begins with resistance. It begins the moment life shows you one direction and your mind demands another. You want results now, but time moves slowly. You want clarity, but life offers confusion. You want certainty, but the path unfolds step by step. And in that gap between what is and what you wish, frustration is born. You see, reality is not cruel, it is neutral. It simply is. But the mind has a habit of arguing with it. The mind says, this should not be happening. I should be further by now. Things should be easier. And every time you say should, you quietly declare war on the present moment. Alan Watts often reminded us that life is not a problem to be solved. It is an experience to be lived. Yet frustration appears when we treat life like a machine that must obey our plans. When it doesn't, we tighten our grip, we push harder, we rush, and the tighter we hold, the more strained we become. Think about water flowing down a river. It doesn't force its way forward. It moves with the terrain, not against it. When it meets a rock, it doesn't argue, it goes around it. And yet, over time, water shapes mountains. Frustration comes when we forget this wisdom. We expect growth without discomfort, progress without patience, success without uncertainty. But reality doesn't work that way. Growth is uneven, progress is quiet, and clarity often comes after confusion, not before it. When you fight reality, you drain your energy, not because the task is impossible, but because resistance doubles the weight. You are not just climbing the mountain, you are complaining about the mountain while climbing it. And that complaint becomes heavier than the climb itself. The moment you stop arguing with what is, something extraordinary happens. The mind relaxes, the body softens. You still take action, but now action flows instead of strains. You move not from anger but from understanding. Acceptance does not mean giving up. It means seeing clearly. It means saying, this is where I am. Not with defeat, but with honesty. From that place, frustration loosens its grip, because you are no longer demanding life to meet your expectations. You are learning how to meet life. And strangely enough, once you stop fighting reality, reality begins to cooperate. Opportunities appear, insights arise, solutions feel lighter, not because life changed, but because you did. So if you feel frustrated right now, pause and ask yourself this: what am I resisting? What part of reality am I refusing to accept? That answer might be the doorway back to peace and forward movement. I'm curious what's something in your life you've been fighting instead of accepting. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your words might help someone else feel less alone on their journey. Frustration deepens when your eyes are fixed only on the finish line. You wake up thinking about results. You measure your worth by progress. You count days, months, years, asking, am I there yet? And the more you stare at the destination, the heavier each step begins to feel. Because life, in its quiet wisdom, does not move in straight lines toward your expectations. This is where frustration quietly takes root. Alan Watts often spoke about life as music. You don't listen to a song just to reach the final note. If you did, the fastest musicians would be the best and silence would be the ultimate success. But that's absurd. The joy of music lives in the unfolding, in every note, every pause, every rhythm along the way. Yet when it comes to our dreams, we forget this. We treat life like a race instead of a dance. We rush the steps. We skip the moments. We reduce the present to a waiting room for some future achievement. And in doing so, we rob ourselves of meaning. Frustration arises when the process feels like an obstacle instead of the point. You begin to resent the practice, the learning, the repetition. You ask why progress feels slow, why mastery takes time. But mastery has always taken time. Growth has always been invisible at first. The seed does not shout while growing underground, but it is growing nonetheless. When you chase outcomes, you place your happiness on delay. You tell yourself, I'll be calm when I succeed. I'll feel worthy when I arrive. I'll enjoy life once I've made it. And until then, you live in frustration. But the truth is this: Outcomes are unstable. They come and go. Today's success becomes tomorrow's baseline. The finish line keeps moving. If your peace depends on reaching it, peace will always remain just out of reach. The process, however, is always available. It is here now. In the effort you make today, in the skill you sharpen quietly, in the discipline you practice when no one is watching. When you learn to respect the process, frustration loses its power, because even on slow days, you are still living. This doesn't mean you stop setting goals. It means you stop worshipping them. Goals are directions, not destinations of happiness. They point the way, but they are not the road itself. When you honor the road, every step has value. Even mistakes become teachers. Even delays become lessons. The irony is this: when you stop obsessing over outcomes, results often come more naturally. Your energy becomes cleaner, your focus sharper, your work deeper. You move with life instead of dragging it forward by force. So ask yourself gently, am I enjoying what I'm becoming, or only demanding what I want to become? Because dreams are not destroyed by failure, they are destroyed by frustration born from impatience. Learn the rhythm, trust the timing. Life is not asking you to hurry, it is asking you to participate. Do you feel more focused on the result than the journey right now? Share in the comments what process are you learning to appreciate, even if it feels slow. Frustration is not born from what is happening. It is born from your resistance to what is. We often imagine frustration as something the world does to us, an unfair delay, an unexpected obstacle, a closed door that should have been opened by now. But if you listen closely, frustration is the sound of the mind arguing with reality. It is the quiet voice saying, "This shouldn't be happening," when in fact it already is. Alan Watts reminded us that reality does not respond to our preferences. The river does not stop flowing because we wish it to move faster. The night does not shorten because we are impatient for morning. Life unfolds at its own pace, and frustration appears the moment we try to force it into our schedule. Think about it. When you accept rain, you open an umbrella. When you resist rain, you complain and still get wet. Frustration is the same kind of unnecessary suffering. The mind loves control. It wants guarantees, timelines, certainty. It wants life to follow a script that makes sense. But life is not a script, it is improvisation. And the more tightly you cling to how things should be, the more painful it becomes when they aren't. This is where dreams quietly begin to suffer. You work hard, yet progress seems slow. You do the right things, yet the outcome doesn't match your expectations. Instead of adapting, the mind tightens. It starts labeling the moment as failure, wasted time, or proof that something is wrong with you. That internal battle drains energy far more than the challenge itself ever could. Frustration is exhaustion created by resistance. Acceptance does not mean giving up, it means seeing clearly. When you accept reality as it is, you stop fighting shadows. Your energy returns. You respond instead of react. You move with clarity instead of anger. Acceptance is not passive. It is intelligent cooperation with life. Imagine trying to swim upstream, cursing the current for not obeying you. Now imagine turning your body, feeling the water, and adjusting your strokes. The river hasn't changed, but you have, and suddenly movement becomes possible again. The same is true with your dreams. When things don't go as planned, reality is offering information. Resistance turns that information into frustration. Acceptance turns it into wisdom. It allows you to ask better questions. What is this moment teaching me? What adjustment is needed? Where am I forcing instead of flowing? Frustration says life is wrong. Acceptance says life is speaking. And here is the quiet paradox. When you stop fighting reality, reality often softens, not because it bends to your will, but because you are no longer wasting energy resisting it. That energy becomes focus, it becomes patience, it becomes resilience. Dreams are not destroyed by obstacles, they are destroyed by prolonged resistance to what cannot be changed. So the invitation is simple but not easy. Let go of the argument with life. See things as they are, not as you demand them to be. In that clarity, frustration dissolves, and action becomes effortless again. You stop burning yourself on expectations and start moving forward with awareness. Life is not against you, it is simply not obligated to follow your timetable. Where in your life are you resisting reality instead of working with it? Share your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes clarity begins when we speak it out loud. Frustration is not loud at first. It doesn't crash into your life like a storm. It leaks slowly, quietly, like a hole in a bucket you keep trying to fill. You wake up with ambition. You have goals, ideas, a vision of what your life could become. But somewhere along the way, frustration settles in. Not dramatic frustration, just enough to make everything feel heavier than it should. And before you realize it, the energy meant for your dreams is being spent on inner conflict. Here is the truth we often overlook. Dreams do not die from lack of talent or opportunity. They die from emotional exhaustion. Frustration consumes mental energy. It tightens the body. It shortens patience. It turns simple tasks into burdens. When you are frustrated, you are not just tired, you are divided. Part of you wants to move forward, while another part is busy arguing with the present moment. Alan Watts often spoke about how resistance creates unnecessary tension. Imagine clenching your fist all day. Eventually, your hand grows tired, not because it's working, but because it refuses to relax. Frustration works the same way. You are not exhausted because the path is too hard. You are exhausted because you are gripping life too tightly. And dreams require spaciousness. They need curiosity. They need playfulness. They need room to breathe. But frustration suffocates all of that. It narrows your vision until you only see what's missing, what's unfair, what hasn't worked yet. In that narrowed state, creativity dries up, motivation fades, and even progress begins to feel meaningless. This is how frustration quietly kills dreams, not by stopping you, but by draining your joy. You stop experimenting. You stop trusting the process. You stop listening to that inner voice that once guided you forward. Instead, everything becomes heavy with expectation. You tell yourself, by now, I should be further. And that single thought steals more energy than 100 hours of work ever could. But here's the shift. Energy returns the moment you release the inner struggle. When you stop fighting where you are, the body relaxes, the mind clears. Suddenly, you are no longer spending energy on resentment or comparison. That same energy becomes focus. It becomes endurance. It becomes quiet confidence. This is not about forcing positivity. It is about honesty. If today feels slow, let it be slow. If progress feels invisible, let it be invisible. Nature does not rush its growth, yet nothing is wasted. A tree does not grow faster by complaining about the soil. It grows by adapting to it. When you treat your journey the same way, frustration loses its power. You conserve energy. You move steadily. You begin to understand that success is not fueled by pressure, but by presence. Your dream does not need you to suffer for it. It needs you to stay awake. So ask yourself gently, where am I spending energy fighting the process instead of nourishing the path? Because the moment you stop feeding frustration, your dreams begin to feed on something far more powerful: clarity, patience, and sustained effort. Have you noticed frustration draining your motivation or creativity? Share your experience in the comments. Your insight might help someone else recognize what they've been silently carrying. Frustration has a subtle way of changing how you see now. It convinces you that this moment is wrong, unfinished, or beneath you. And once the present becomes the enemy, life turns into a constant battle. You begin to live with clenched teeth. You tell yourself, this isn't where I'm supposed to be. Things should be moving faster. I'll be happy when I get there. And in doing so, you quietly abandon the only place where anything can actually happen, the present moment. Alan Watts often reminded us that life is not a journey towards some final destination. It is more like music. You don't listen to music just to reach the final note. You listen for the experience unfolding right now. Frustration, however, makes you deaf to the music. It turns every note into noise because you're obsessed with the ending. When you fight the present, you fragment yourself. Part of you lives in a future that hasn't arrived. Another part resents the now for not being that future yet. This inner division is exhausting, and exhaustion makes dreams feel unreachable. Think about it. How many times have you rushed through a day telling yourself, once this is over, I'll finally live? But that day ends, and another once this is over takes its place. Frustration keeps postponing life. And here's the paradox: the future you want can only be built through full attention to the present. But frustration steals that attention. It makes you impatient, reactive, and blind to small opportunities hiding in plain sight. You miss lessons because you're too busy complaining about the test. You miss growth because you're obsessed with the outcome. You miss peace because you're arguing with reality. This doesn't mean you give up ambition. It means you stop treating now as an obstacle. The present moment is not the problem, it's the raw material. When you stop resisting it, something shifts. The mind softens. You move with the flow instead of against it. Even effort begins to feel lighter, not because it's easier, but because it's no longer poisoned by resentment. Frustration says, I'll accept life once it meets my conditions. Wisdom says, I'll work with life as it is. And that difference changes everything. When you accept the present not passively, but intelligently, you reclaim power. You act instead of react. You create instead of complain. You build instead of burn energy wishing things were different. This is how frustration stops ruling your life. Not by force, but by understanding. The present moment is not a delay. It is the doorway. Every skill you want to develop, every dream you hope to reach, every change you desire must pass through now. If you reject it, you reject the process. If you honor it, the process begins to cooperate with you. So slow down, breathe, look around. Ask yourself, what is this moment asking of me, not what is it denying me? Because when the present is no longer your enemy, frustration loses its grip, and your dreams finally have a place to grow. Do you often feel at war with where you are right now? Share in the comments how frustration shows up in your life and what you're learning to see differently. Frustration doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. It tells you to lower your expectations. It convinces you to stop dreaming so loudly. It says, be realistic, when what it really means is, don't risk being disappointed again. This is how frustration quietly kills great dreams, not by destroying them, but by shrinking them. When frustration settles in, your world becomes smaller. You stop thinking in possibilities and start thinking in limits. You measure life not by what could be, but by what has already failed. And slowly your imagination, your most powerful tool, begins to suffocate. Alan Watts often spoke about how the mind creates invisible prisons. Frustration is one of the strongest prison guards. It keeps reminding you of past mistakes, delays, and disappointments until you start believing that your future must look the same. You say things like, people like me don't succeed. This is just how life is. I tried once and it didn't work. Notice how small those sentences are. Frustration narrows your thinking until you can't see beyond survival. You stop asking what excites me and start asking what's safe. And while safety feels comforting, it slowly robs you of aliveness. Dreams require space. Curiosity requires openness. Growth requires risk. But frustration hates all three. It trains you to play defense with your life, to avoid embarrassment, to avoid effort, to avoid hope. And in doing so, you begin living a life that feels technically okay but deeply unsatisfying. Here's the deeper truth. Frustration isn't proof that your dreams are too big. It's often proof that your patience has been stretched. A seed doesn't doubt the tree it will become just because the soil is dark. But humans do. We look at the darkness and assume something is wrong. Frustration arises when we forget that growth happens invisibly before it becomes visible. And because you can't see progress yet, you assume there is none. So you shrink the dream to match your frustration instead of expanding your patience to match the dream. This is where vision is lost. Alan Watts reminded us that the universe doesn't rush in yet. Everything gets done. Rivers don't force themselves forward. They move persistently, shaping mountains over time. But frustration makes you want immediate proof, instant reward, and quick validation. When that doesn't arrive, you retreat. The antidote is not blind optimism. It is perspective. Step back and ask yourself, what if my timing is not wrong, just unfinished? What if this frustration is not a stop sign, but a stretching point? When you widen your view, frustration loosens its grip. You begin to think in longer arcs, deeper rhythms, and broader possibilities. You stop judging your entire future based on a temporary feeling, and suddenly your vision returns. You remember why you started. You reconnect with curiosity. You allow yourself to dream without demanding immediate results. This is how frustration loses power, not by fighting it, but by outgrowing it. So don't let a narrow moment decide a wide life. Don't let a tired mind rewrite a bold future. Your dreams don't need to be smaller. Your patience needs to be deeper. Have you ever caught yourself shrinking your dreams because of frustration? Share your experience in the comments, and let's remind each other to think bigger again. Frustration is not just an emotion, it is a voice. And when it stays too long, that voice begins to sound like you. At first, frustration is directed outward toward circumstances, people, timing, or fate. But slowly, quietly, it turns inward. It begins to question your intelligence, your worth, your ability, and without realizing it, you stop being your own ally. This is one of the most dangerous effects of frustration. It convinces you that you are the problem. You start saying things like, "What's wrong with me? Why can't I get this right? Everyone else seems to figure it out. Why not me?" These thoughts don't arrive as attacks, they arrive as conclusions, and once you accept them, frustration has completed its work. Alan Watts often reminded us that the ego loves to take things personally that were never personal to begin with. Life unfolds through complexity, chance, rhythm, and timing, but frustration reduces all of that into a single accusation. You failed. But what if nothing is wrong with you at all? What if you are simply in a season of learning? Frustration collapses compassion. It removes the gentle space you need to grow. Instead of curiosity, it installs judgment. Instead of patience, it installs shame. And once shame enters, motivation collapses. Because no one grows well under constant self-attack. When you are frustrated, you stop listening to your inner guidance and start listening to your inner critic. You overanalyze every move. You hesitate. You second guess. And even when you take action, it feels heavy, forced, and joyless. This is why frustration drains energy so quickly. It creates inner conflict. You are trying to move forward while simultaneously punishing yourself for not being further ahead. Imagine trying to walk while pulling yourself backward. Alan Watts would say that this is the mind arguing with itself, creating unnecessary suffering. The self becomes divided, one part demanding progress, the other condemning delay. And in between, your confidence erodes. But here's the quiet truth. Frustration is not a signal that you are failing. It is often a signal that you are caring deeply. You don't get frustrated about things you don't value. So instead of turning frustration into self-attack, what if you turned it into self-inquiry? Not "what's wrong with me," but "what is this moment trying to teach me?" When you approach yourself with understanding rather than criticism, something shifts. The inner war ends, you regain clarity, and progress becomes possible again, not because pressure increased, but because resistance decreased. Remember this: growth requires kindness toward yourself. The mind learns best when it feels safe. Creativity flows when it feels accepted. Strength develops when you stop fighting yourself. You are not late. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are becoming. And frustration does not define you unless you let it speak in your name. So the next time frustration arises, pause, listen. But don't obey its harsh conclusions. Treat yourself the way you would treat someone you love, firm, yes, but gentle. Because the greatest sabotage is not failure. It is turning against yourself while trying to grow. Have you ever noticed frustration turning into self-doubt? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might help someone else be kinder to themselves today. Frustration feels powerful, but it is actually a surrender of power. It convinces you that something outside of you is in control: time, people, circumstances, luck, and the moment you believe that, you stop moving from choice and start reacting from tension. Life no longer feels like a dance, it feels like a struggle. Alan Watts often spoke about how suffering increases when we resist the present moment. Frustration is resistance wearing a familiar face. It is the refusal to accept what is while demanding what should be. And in that gap between reality and expectation, your energy leaks away. Think about it. The more frustrated you are, the less clearly you see. The more tightly you grip the outcome, the less flexible your thinking becomes. You stop noticing options. You stop trusting timing. You stop trusting yourself. And yet, the moment you release that grip even slightly, something remarkable happens. You breathe. Letting go of frustration does not mean giving up your dreams. It means removing the emotional weight that is crushing your ability to reach them. It means shifting from force to flow. This is not passive, it is intelligent. When you let go of frustration, you reclaim your attention. Instead of obsessing over what hasn't happened, you begin to notice what can be done next. Small steps become visible again. Simple actions regain their power. Alan Watts would say that life is not a problem to be solved, but an experience to be lived. Frustration arises when we treat life like a machine that must obey our timeline. But life is more like music. It unfolds in rhythm, not command. You cannot rush a melody without destroying it. In the same way, your growth has its own tempo. The moment you stop fighting that tempo, you align with it, and alignment restores strength. Letting go of frustration is also an act of trust. Not blind optimism, but a quiet confidence that your effort is not wasted, even when results are invisible. Roots grow before trees are seen. When you release frustration, you stop measuring your worth by speed. You stop comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 10. You stop demanding certainty before taking the next step. And in that space, creativity returns. You respond instead of react. You adjust instead of collapse. You persist instead of burn out. This is where real power lives, not in controlling outcomes, but in maintaining clarity regardless of them. Frustration tells you, if I don't get what I want, I lose. Wisdom replies, no, if I lose myself, I lose. The greatest victory is not forcing life to obey you, but learning how to move with it without losing direction. So the next time frustration rises, don't suppress it, don't judge it. Simply notice it. Breathe. Step back. Ask yourself, what happens if I stop fighting this moment? You may discover that peace was never waiting at the finish line. It was waiting in your willingness to let go. And from that peace, action becomes clear again. What helps you let go of frustration when things aren't going your way? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your insight might help someone else reclaim their power today.